Mozart is indeed the first composer who wanted to be dismissed from being dependent on an employer. Mozart was the first one to go through with this, because he was not a man to make compromises, and of course, there were conflicts about his work situation. He was well aware of his own talent. He had a good portion of self-esteem. In one of his letters, he writes that in 100 years, there will not be a composer of such significance. But then he had to sit among the cooks or the lackeys. It was a question of social status.
Vienna, one of the most powerful cities at that time, was the capital city of the extensive Habsburg imperial empire. Under the rule of Empress Maria Theresia, life at court was characterized by magnificence and splendor, and despite all the absolutist pomp and circumstance of the ruling class, with its extravagant ceremonies, besides the passion for splendor, the Empress had a definite leaning towards reformist activities.
Certainly at that time, Vienna was more or less the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. Under the rule of Maria Theresa and Joseph II, a huge number of reforms were made throughout the empire, which saved it from a revolution similar to the one that took place in France. It was a major intellectual challenge.
Mozart had already come into contact with the imperial family in 1762. At the age of 6, he played before its members, and this gave rise to the nice little anecdotes about how sweet little Wolfgang kissed the Empress, and how the dear Archduchess Marie Antoinette helped the child prodigy to get up again after he'd fallen down. In 1780, the Empress died, and the whole world looked towards Vienna. Who would be Maria Theresia's successor, and thus become the new ruler of the Habsburg crown lands, as well as the new king of Bohemia and Hungary? Joseph II, Maria Theresia's son, succeeded her. The European countries under absolutist rule remained tense. The new emperor had the reputation of being a true philanthropist. He opposed any form of vanity and was free of any desire to put himself constantly in the limelight. He began a program of reforms never known before. He wanted to open up knowledge for the public, to abolish serfdom, censorship. His activities were characterized by the desire to ensure medical care for everyone in public hospitals, the setting up of institutions for the mentally ill, as well as giving great support for scientific research. Fortunately for Mozart, the new emperor loved music.
Of course, it was a great stroke of fortune. Firstly, it was usual at the Habsburg court, from the rulers down to the archdukes, that they themselves made music. If you imagine that no opera was performed under Joseph II, the score of which he himself had not played on the piano, you can see there was a very high level of musicality. There was an understanding of what musical quality meant.
what sort of society awaited Mozart at that time in Vienna. About 15 princely families and 60 counts lived in the sophisticated districts of the city around the imperial household. This was a time without war, and the nobility squandered money. Typical of society in Vienna was that a lot of money was invested in art, and this is still true nowadays. Then as now, the Viennese believe that what is modern is necessary and therefore interesting for one's own image. But most of all, they really love what is well known and familiar. It was no different in Mozart's time, and so when he came to Vienna, he found an open-minded society with an eager interest in the arts. Count Arco's words of admonishment were forgotten.
Mozart to Vienna, but be very careful. There, a person's fame is only very brief. Initially, one is praised and earns a lot. That is true, but after a few months, the Viennese want something new.
However, from 1781, a new name was in vogue in the famous palaces in the center of Vienna. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was the shooting star of Viennese cultural society. Not as a composer, but as an extraordinarily gifted piano virtuoso who enchanted his audiences with performances of his own works, not only because of his incredible playing technique, but with his truly incomparable piano compositions.
I am not going to embark on a publicity exercise for Mozart. It is something that simply makes you speechless. Regarding many other things, you can always find topics of discussion about purely musical things. But with Mozart, this does not happen. It is not a matter of always being able to hear something, but every now and again you suddenly hear a string quintet, and you are simply blown away afterwards.
Mozart hat irgendwo, wenn Sie so wollen, unbewusst oder bewusst, ist
It is really a matter of how we shape our relationship to Mozart nowadays. Did he touch on the secrets of life in a way that only a few can? That is why one can only talk of getting closer to it.
Die eben, was nur ganz wenigen gegeben ist. Und deshalb kann man auch nur von einer Annäherung sprechen. Das ist ja im gesamten
One can think about all sorts of things. Academic research can be undertaken, and yet the mysteries of the world do not become clearer.
Wissenschaftlich forschen und trotzdem erschließt sich die Welt nicht.
At that time, a different world played an important role in the cultural and entertainment life of the capital city. The last Turkish wars had taken place many years earlier, and sophisticated society enjoyed the allegedly sensuous and erotic exotic flair of the Orient, which thus found its way into literature, theatre and opera. Mozart's opera, Die Entführung aus dem Serail, was only one of many revolving around an Oriental subject, but it was certainly the most magnificent. By coincidence, Aloysia Weber's younger sister was also called Constanze. As chance would have it, in Mozart's life, the Weber family was also living in Vienna when he moved there. Mozart fell in love with the sister, about whom the father wrote,
"She is not ugly, but not really very beautiful. She is not witty, but has sufficient common sense to fulfill her duties as a wife and mother."
The suppositions why Mozart married this woman fill countless pages of biographies. We do not know whether he was hooked by the scheming mother Weber. What we do know is that he married Constanze on August the 4th, 1782, in St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna.